Security agents arrive at a mobile home in the desert. The owner of the home has been acting strangely for some time now and repeats only one word: rebirth. But the main thing is that the man is immortal. The formerly completely blind man regained his sight after a meteorite fell nearby. The old man's wife takes them to the landing site, but there is nothing there. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, David comes to his wife's grave. He says that the world is changing, people are worried, and he has to work very hard to support their daughter. Returning home, David hears news about protests by local residents against the country's president's plan to send another 100,000 people to participate in Operation Station to occupy Iran, despite protests from the Russian and Chinese authorities. Later, David gets to a car repair shop where he learns sad news about the closure of the enterprise. He goes to a bar where TV shows stories from Iran again. Casualties are increasing, which angers the Americans. David's colleague, a young guy named Zach, is also sitting at the bar and hears one of the mechanics complaining about the weakness of American soldiers and making fun of them. Zach gets into an argument, which leads to a fight. David tries to separate the guys, but then Zach falls, and everyone sees that he has a prosthesis instead of a leg. David offers to give the guy a lift and scold him for his recklessness. It turns out that Zach himself went through the battles and knows what and how it really happens in the troops. That's why he can't stand these armchair critics. He asks David to stop by the house where disabled veterans live and leaves, and the mechanic goes home. Entering the kitchen, he sees a birthday cake on the table and remembers that today is his birthday. His daughter came home from college, which means that she dropped out of school. He is indignant, but Annabelle reminds him that the last payments have not been received, which means she was simply expelled. David apologizes, but the girl does not want him to work himself to a nervous breakdown again and gives her father a watch. Annabelle goes to bed, and the upset David goes to the bar again. But on the way, he suddenly sees a falling celestial body, loses control, and his car flips over. He tries to get out, and with a fading gaze, sees a female figure nearby. The man somehow gets out of the car and follows the woman, who leads him to a raging fire in the clearing. The next morning, Annabelle wakes up and sees that her father is not at home. The worried girl calls her friends and colleagues, but no one has seen him, and the sheriff informs that he will not begin searching for at least a day. Then Annabelle herself gets into the car and drives around the places where David might be. The bartender can't help, but expresses condolences over the death of her mother. Annabelle drives on and soon sees her father's car in a ditch. The girl takes a flashlight and begins to examine the nearby forest, but David is nowhere to be found. Annabelle gets back into the car very upset. She turns on the headlights and suddenly sees her father's figure on the road. Later at the hospital, David is examined by doctors. Annabelle is worried and waits in the corridor for the results. And suddenly the doctor asks to clarify a strange situation. Everyone knows that David gave a kidney to his terminally ill wife, hoping for her recovery. But now he has two completely healthy organs in his body, and soon, despite the terrible injuries he received in the accident, he gets up and starts walking. The daughter drives him home, and he behaves very strangely, although he does not tell his daughter that he sees his fallen wife everywhere. Annabelle begins to ask questions because at the hospital her father spoke to her mother as if she were standing next to the bed and asked him not to move away. The TV shows the news again, promising an imminent world battle, and suddenly David hears Jane's voice. He goes outside and sees his wife. The woman hugs him as if she were alive and reminds him of the evening when he found out he was going to be a father. He said then that he did not want to bring a child into such a terrible world, but now the woman knows for sure that there is hope, and it is in David's hands. True, there is very little time left. Confused, he returns home and begins to draw something. At this time, Agent Julius Types listens to instructions from his superior regarding his search for stones falling from the sky. According to the official, this is a waste of time and effort. The battle is gaining momentum, and it is profitable for the government despite the troubles of the population. But Julius is sure that it is UFOs that will help stop the aggression. Doctors are just finishing examining the formerly blind old man from the desert, in whom they found an incomprehensible organism that was destroyed when it was extracted. Julius's partner advises him to hide the truth from the old man's wife, and David is just preparing his car and suddenly sees his wife behind the wheel, as if Jane approves of his trip. At this time, Zach is repairing his prosthesis in the nursing home, and his comrade James admits that he is ready to train recruits even with one arm. The conversation is interrupted by the appearance of David, who offers Zach a job. The men go to the forest, where David shows a large crater with a celestial stone in the middle. They drag it out, load it into David's pickup truck, and take it to the barn, where the man is preparing a container for the stone. Later, the daughter admits that she went through her mother's things and is ready to give them away because it is time for them to start a new life. The man recalls an incident from the past and asks not to forget his mother. Meanwhile, Zach wakes up from severe pain in his leg and suddenly sees something starting to grow from his stump. In the morning, he and James join a protest against the battle, but the police disperse the people. There are also those who call the former soldiers traitors, unprepared to fight for their country. Zach becomes very ill. At this time, David finishes welding the container and suddenly sees the stone release thin tentacles that move in the sunlight. Zach comes to the barn, is amazed by the sight of the stone, and suddenly loses consciousness. Later, Annabelle finds Zach tossing and turning in delirium on the couch in the living room. David takes care of him and refuses to take him to the hospital. The shocked girl sees that the guy is growing a new leg, and the agents receive information about another stone that has landed. Julius is sure that this is a way out of the global crisis. People will be cured, and there will be no need to fight. Meanwhile, David and Annabelle move the man closer to the stone. The tentacles immediately wrap around the guy's arms and legs, and the recovery process begins to go faster. The girl loses consciousness from shock and suddenly remembers her dying mother and David, who was never able to visit her before her death. In the morning, she sees Zach walking barefoot through the grass through the window, not believing what happened. Later, he goes to the barn, where David is finishing a drawing of what he thinks is a necessary shelter for the stone. He knows that protection is needed, although he has no idea why he is doing this. Later, the men go to their friend, the owner of the junkyard, and beg for the necessary metal parts to build a protective cocoon. After that, the men go to a bar where David's friend is drinking, and the man puts him in the back seat of his car and drives home on the way, noticing agents who are examining the site of the meteorite fall, which he took to his barn in time. Later, he pulls the keys out of his friend's pocket and goes to the junkyard with Zach, from where the couple steals a cement mixer. In the morning, David's friend wakes up in his car with the keys in his hands, and the agents realize that only a small fragment of the stone remains in the crater. The sheriff recalls the accident that happened here a couple of days ago and David's kidney that appeared. Scientists explain to the agents that the structure of the stone is unique and consists of millions of different DNA, both plants and animals. There are even some similar to humans. It's like evolution in a very compressed form. Meanwhile, David and Zach remake the cement mixer into a protective cocoon where they place the stone. Annabelle burns her mother's things when Agent Julius calls her. He and his partner interrogate David, but he says that he didn't see anything special and that he got into an accident because of booze. Julius tries to get him to talk, promising world peace after people learn the truth about their origins. He asks to give the stone, but David pretends that he knows nothing about it. And then Julius talks about the organism in the blind old man. David takes the agent to his barn and says that he kept the stone here, but quickly noticed that it did not like the humidity, and then the object simply melted. Julius does not believe it, but thanks David for his help. Annabelle is alarmed by the appearance of the agents and is afraid that they will do the same to her father as to the blind old man, and he admits that he saw her mother, who showed that something will happen to the world. The girl asks to give the stone and reminds that her father became young and could not say goodbye to his wife. At night, he sees a dream in which his daughter burns in the fire of an atomic bomb and drives to the workshop but notices surveillance. Later, the agents detain his car, finding the owner of the junkyard behind the wheel. Meanwhile, Zach sees the beginning of the glow of the stone and remembers his legless and armless friend from the nursing home. Later, he meets with Annabelle, and the girl talks about her mother and asks to save her father, fearing for his life. Zach promises this, but first takes her to James. However, James does not believe his story, despite his friend's new leg. On the way out of the house, the couple is detained by agents. Meanwhile, David climbs inside the cement mixer and sees Jane, who feels completely alive. The woman again reminds him that there is almost no time. Zach and Annabelle are brought to David's house, and when they refuse to talk, the boy is beaten. The father sees this through the window, sets the barn on fire, and when the agents retreat to him, enters the house and disarms Julius. Annabelle frees Zach and before leaving, hits the agent on the head, knocking him out. They climb out the window and run into the night when the returning agents open fire, wounding the girl. David and Zach put her in the car and rush to the workshop. The agents pursue them, although Julius' partner does not approve of his actions. At this time, Annabelle suddenly says that her mother needs her. David drives to the cement mixer and carries his daughter's body inside, while Zach guards them. But no matter how David asks for a stone, the girl remains motionless. At this time, the agents drive up and surround the cement mixer. David douses the car with gasoline and prepares to set it on fire. unaware that the tentacles have begun to revive Annabelle. The agents demand that David put out the lighter, but he does not agree, and then a living daughter looks out of the mixer. David is distracted and gets a bullet from an agent. Zach responds. A shootout begins. The guys are wounded, and Julius's partner shoots his colleague, trying to stop this. But at that moment, a nuclear explosion occurs. Everyone looks at the growing mushroom, realizing that the world is destroyed. Wounded David asks Zach to get into the mixer of the cement mixer and closes the hatch behind them. Julius makes David open the car, but he replies that he cannot do this. And at that moment, water suddenly begins to emerge inside. It fills the body completely, and Noble and Zach choke and freeze in it. David sees his wife, who calls him home, and explosions grow above the ground. Sometime later, Annabelle and Zach open their eyes and embrace each other, and the protective cocoon appears in a post-apocalyptic world, releasing the beginning of a new life.